to question anything has become like the most scandalous thing ever, and that's really like weirds me out. Like it used to be like like skeptics and like people who were good at challenging conventional wisdom used to be like revered.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like the sort of quirky like characters who would say, you know, like maybe not outrageous things, but like things way outside the box, and people used to like adore those kinds of people. Like especially if you go back like, I don't know, 30, 40 years, like you get people like David Bowie. He was like, he's still a legend today because of he was, you know, he thought outside the box. And it seems like that we got the walls closing in on anything that kind of counters the 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 accepted narrative on anything. Like there was, do you know Brett Weinstein? He had this campaign, the Articles of Unity, to try and get like people to not vote third party in America. And he was involved in some like deplatforming stuff at Evergreen State University or Evergreen State College. But anyway, he was like talking in April or May about the possibility that that COVID was like made in a lab or was altered or studied in a lab and had escaped from a lab. And he was like pointing to like certain characteristics of it that he said like maybe indicate it, and people called him a nutcase. And then like 9 months later, it turns out that might be the case. Like it still might not be, but like it's like what do you think it is about COVID that makes like people shut down like anything that's like counter the official like story? Because it's a super dangerous place to be in when he was saying something that has now turned out to be like maybe true, but was called a crazy man, and like people were, you know, saying he should be deplatformed for saying it.
I don't know. In a way, I think that this is I guess more of a symptom than a cause of that mentality. I feel as though we've gotten more and more politically divided and intolerant of others' views. And I'd encountered sort of this type of mentality over the past few years from friends and colleagues where I had an opinion that wasn't popular about. I have very strong views on, free speech and what's happened with the campus speech. I think basically we should be hearing even views that are abhorrent to us, and people shouldn't be canceled. And so that's an area where I've clashed a lot. And I voiced those opinions, and then people refused to speak to me again. So, so this sort of intolerance I've experienced with respect to my COVID views was sort of the climax almost. And so I think that this is just the way that our society is going. I don't know if I want to say just the US, or it's common in Europe as well. But for some reason, there's just such a deep political divide, and we've sort of attributed morality to, which I think sort of goes back to what you were saying. We've started to imbue views about these things with someone's moral character. And I think that that's a problem. Whether or not you think that somebody should be allowed to speak on, Stanford's campus, I think that reasonable people could differ and have different views on that, but we've decided to say, well, you're a bad person because you think this. You're a bad person because you question whether masks work. And I think we've been going there for a long time, and now we're really here, and we're in a kind of scary place.
How much do you think social media is to blame for that kind of like lack of tolerance for other people's views?
Yeah, I think social media is a huge part of it. I think I think people have become it's so easy to be nasty to somebody when you don't see them face to face. And so I think that has sort of increased this divide, not to mention you can just say whatever you want with, there's just so much information, and a lot of it is completely crazy. And so it's just kind of, I think it's sort of polarized things even more than we were before. So it's too bad. I thought it might be a good thing, just making, you can share information much more easily, but I think it's been by and large negative. And then if we didn't have social media, we probably wouldn't be where we are with the coronavirus stuff.
Yeah, potentially not. I mean, for like a very brief detour into like, I talk about this in my book, actually, shameless plug, where and I talk a lot about how we can kind of get like fixed into our own like little information bubbles, and the way the filter bubbles work, and the way the algorithms push us towards things that like sort of confirm our bias or make us really really angry. There's no like middle ground, like in terms of what algorithms tend to recommend. It's always like the extreme, and it
Yeah.
tends to like keep us like hold in these little communities where we're only seeing like the most extreme version of the other side of the argument that's popping up because it makes people mad, basically. Or you're seeing like the extreme confirmation of like your own side of the argument, where there seems to be this like constant competition to like be the most extreme,
Yeah.
for for the most like I don't know, MAGA points, or the most woke points, or whatever whatever the issue is. You get the most like, I don't know, making the libs cry, or you get the most like shutting Trump down points. And it works in the same way, I think, with like the masks and the lockdowns and everything, where people just they either see people saying, this is terrifying, we have to lock down until 2035, Bill Gates says so. Or you get or you get like someone showing you like some guy who's like concocted this like huge diagram as to why Disney released why Disney has created like a fake coronavirus in order to take over like DC Comics and rule the entire comic book cinematic universe. Like you only see the crazy stuff, and you don't see like the normal people, and it's like making us all mad, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like one of the interesting points that like it's your Twitter handle, like Lefty Lockdown Skeptic, and it's been interesting for me to watch like the division, and we talked about like generally across society, but on the left especially, and to me it kind of looks like you're separating like the lefties from like the classical liberals, like the people who would have been probably quite centrist but like believe in the ideas of the left because the Overton window has been shifted so far right. But like as soon as something where they're like trying to argue for, say, like freedom of speech or something along those lines, or just freedom of assembly or anything that's being violated right now, that they're kind of being cut aside from the majority of the left. Like, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And I guess at this point, I would probably describe myself more as a classical liberal. Either I've changed or I've just realized there's a lot I don't agree with on the left and their approach to all of this. But yeah.
I mean, like I find the same thing, that I've like almost redefined my politics as like thinking that maybe I'm probably quite close to a classical liberal, even though like my friends constantly make fun of how left wing I am. And it's like this year has been really strange in like the really fundamentally disagreeing with a lot of people who I used to think could do no wrong, essentially. And not that I don't still believe in a lot of their causes, but like just like when did you realize that you were not in the majority, like after the initial kind of chaos had calmed down and people started to get more of a grasp on what this was, say around like April May time? Like when did you realize that you were still like heavily in the minority?
Yeah, I'd say April or May. I started, one of the things that I think really made me question. So I read the New York Times, or I used to read the New York Times a lot when I was in NPR, like all good liberals
Hmm.
in the United States. And then New York Times really early on took like a very strong pro-lockdown position, and then shortly thereafter pro-mask position. And I was suspicious because I was just like, how could you know that this is the right thing to do? It's March 15th or something. And I wrote this in an article, but like very quickly, one day masks were, you shouldn't wear masks, and the next day you should. And the New York Times knew for sure that every good person wore a mask. And I was like, I mean, it's one thing to say maybe this is a good idea, maybe you should try it. It's another thing to sort of all of a sudden you're a terrible person if you don't want to wear a mask. So I think when I saw this and the certainty with which these views were being embraced very early on, I realized I was different from the people around me who were like, well, the New York Times says so. So like, obviously. and, and then the coverage of Sweden was another thing that really tipped me off to something going on here that wasn't really just about the science, as they say. the Times ran an article on probably around April 7th or something, calling Sweden a catastrophe, obviously a catastrophe. And I was like, this is like a long-term strategy. You can't look on April 7th and say, well, Sweden now has more coronavirus deaths per capita, so therefore they were a failure. I mean, that's absurd. They're like, we're talking about something that probably will take years or decades to know the effects of. So I just really saw that this wasn't being covered in a way that made any sense to me. And so I started to look outside of that pretty early, April, May. And I came across people like Jeffrey Tucker and Alex Berenson and some of the scientists, Martin Kulldorff, John Ioannidis, and just realized, however the Times was marketing this wasn't the only view, and there was more going on. And I just continued to do more and more research, and can just part ways more and more with everybody else I knew. Well, and they also, something that was really telling to me was they wouldn't listen to me when I tried to explain, like, oh, well, I've been reading this woman, Sunetra Gupta, and she has a different view, and this is what she says, and she's a great theoretical epidemiologist at Oxford. They're like, well, she's wrong. Like, okay.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to our mailing list. Thanks a lot to our sponsor, ExpressVPN, the #1 most trusted VPN. Get lightning fast connectivity with servers in 160 locations across 94 countries. Keep your browsing privacy safe with ExpressVPN and get a 35% discount on 12 months of ExpressVPN when you follow the link in the description below. Don't forget my book is now out and available to order on Amazon and on bookshop.org. That's Brexit, the Establishment Civil War. And most importantly, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.